Call me crazy, but as I was trying to think about things that I was scared of when I was younger, I kind of came up empty. I mean, sure, I was scared of mice then, and I'm still scared of mice now, but I guess I wasn't really a scared kid. But I do know this. I liked to scare people. In particular, I like to scare my sister, Faith. So here's a picture of my sisters. In my family, there are 6 kids, and there are 4 girls and 2 boys. And in this picture, this is my sister Gretch, my sister Faith, me, and my sister Gail. Now, Gretch and Gail, they're okay to scare, but man, scaring Faith was the most fun for me. And in particular, when we were together and we were staying in hotels, that was the most fun. So what I would do is we would all be talking and laughing, and then someone would say, I'm out, I'm going to bed, and everyone would start to fall asleep. Well, I would wait about 15 or 20 minutes until I was sure that everyone was sleeping. And then I would get out of my bed onto the floor. Keep in mind, I'm an adult at this point. And I would crawl quietly and very stealthily over to my sister Faith's part of the bed in the room. And I would just wait for a few seconds, and then I would just reach up and grab her and yell at the same time. So I don't know if she was already in REM, but she was definitely sleeping. And so to be woken up by being touched or grabbed hard and a yell, it was fantastic. And you guys, the best part was sometimes I would do it 2 or 3 times during the night, and she would be scared every time. I think it's funny to be scary to my sisters, but it's amazing to me how many people are really scared of some really unusual things in our world. And it's so scary that our culture has actually created words to describe the crazy fears that people have. So I just want to highlight a couple of them. First is omphalophobia, a fear of belly buttons. Part of me wonders, how did you discover this fear? Like, did you just walk around and ask people to show you their belly buttons? Was it something that was truly from childhood on up? And how do you feel about outies in regards to belly buttons? That must be really scary. Another phobia or fear, paganophobia, the fear of beards. I feel bad for people with this phobia at Christmas time. I feel bad for people with this phobia if you went through the 5th and 6th grade ministry with Charmin. It must have been a very scary time. Or what about poopophobia, the fear of puppets? Childhood there again would have been very, very hard. Or what about turophobia, the fear of cheese? Don't you just wonder, is there anyone in the state of Wisconsin that has this phobia? If so, they must live life in fear every day. Lastly, electrophobia, the fear of chickens. I mean, it's crazy that people are scared of things like this, but I guess we're all scared of something. But now that you're older, I would guess the things that used to scare you when you're younger aren't as much a problem anymore. And if they are, you're probably sleeping with a nightlight. Totally okay, no judgment here. But I am pretty sure that the fears that you feel and experience now are bigger and more serious. And right out of the gate, I can think of some. So I'm going to get real and get serious with you right away. Some of you have the fear of being betrayed by your friends, especially. You have the fear of your parents getting a divorce. You have the fear of failing, not just in school and maybe not even just in a sport, but across the board in life. You have a fear of failure. Some of you fear your parents dying. Some of you fear cancer in general. For the past year, many of you have feared COVID. Or maybe you have feared a sport-ending injury. those are all real. But I have also learned in life that our imagination seems to play a big part in experiencing fear. Have you ever been home alone at night and you heard a noise that logically and realistically is very common? Maybe it's the furnace turning on or the washing machine or lights going on that are activated outside of the house, but you hear it and you are scared that it is something other than what it is. And wherever you are, sitting on the couch because you're babysitting your younger siblings or up in your bed because you're trying to fall asleep, your imagination starts to spin. And you start to think, is there somebody in the house? And are they coming to rob our house? Or are they coming to hurt me? So often, our imagination makes things bigger, right? But I also know that fear causes us to ask the what ifs. If we let it spiral out enough, we ask things like, what if I never get taller than I am right now? I talk to a lot of guys who are teenagers who feel a pressure to be a certain size or to be a certain height. I remember one conversation specifically at summer camp with a kid who said, what if I never grow any more than I am now? Because he was looking and comparing himself to his buddies who were in his life group, and they were all significantly taller than him. Or what if my boyfriend or my girlfriend breaks up with me? Or what if I fail this class? Or what if God isn't real? Or what if this acne never goes away? I was just talking with a student last week who's on the 3rd round of trying something to get rid of her acne. And it's painful, literally, emotionally, and physically, it's painful. And so our fear is not only real, but it can often get the best of us when our imagination digs in as well. When I think of fear, I think there are 3 different ways that most of us respond to fear. And the first is that we fight fear. So we push up against that fear, we act on those fears, and we try to control and fix them. And the key word here is control. We try to control anything that we can in the midst of that overwhelming fear. So maybe your dad isn't doing well physically. Maybe he's been diagnosed with adult onset diabetes. And you yell at him. You find yourself literally yelling at him to take care of himself because you're so scared that it's going to take over and he's going to die. Or maybe you've got a sibling who you know is hanging out with the wrong kind of friends and is going to try to go to a party that weekend, and you try to force that sibling not to because you're scared of what might happen if that person goes to the party. Or maybe you're so scared that you're going to fail that test that you study a crazy amount just so that you can push aside that fear that you'll actually fail. You're a fighter. You try to fight fear. I would guess there are some of you who are listening who can definitely identify with that. Some of us fight. Others of us do what's called flight. It's the opposite of fighting. We actually run from our problems. We avoid our problems at all cost. So if your grandma has cancer and your parents have told you that she might not live very long, you actually avoid seeing your grandma. And it's not because you don't love her. It's because you're scared of the fact that she might die, and you're scared that going to see her would just increase that fear as you maybe see her failing. Or maybe you have stopped asking questions about your dad's job because you fear that he might lose his job. And so for some reason, deep down, you think if I just don't ask any questions, if I don't hear anything about it, then he won't lose his job. Or maybe you've got friends who have hurt you. And rather than fighting it, you actually kind of stay away from those friends, isolate yourself from those friends, just so that you don't have to deal with the fear. You take flight. And others of you do what we call freeze. In the midst of your fear, you literally can't even think, of what it is that you could do to help the situation. You get stuck. If this is you, I imagine that you're like laying in your bed and you just pull the covers up over your head and try to convince yourself that the world isn't really happening and that these things are not really happening. You just freeze and hope that the fear will go away. It's important for us to understand that fear is natural and fear is real. And in certain situations, it can actually be helpful, right? If you're in a spot and you're in danger, that fear that you feel that takes over your body will actually help to save you, to get you away from the dangerous situation. And we talked about a couple weeks ago that emotions, even fear, are actually good things unless they take over and start to impact our words and our actions and our behaviors. So, what does the Bible say about fear? There's an account in Scripture in the book of Matthew where Jesus is with his disciples, and his disciples are in a position of fear. So they're out on a boat on a lake. And as I was studying for this, I thought, how cool for those of us who live in Minnesota. Because we totally can picture what that's like, right? If someone's in Arizona, if someone's in Nevada, or maybe even Florida, they don't understand what it means, but we get it. So they're out on a boat, and while they're out on the boat, a storm blows through. And not just any kind of storm where like there are little white caps and wow, we shouldn't go water skiing today kind of storm, but a storm where the waves are crashing around them and probably even into their boat. And the disciples were so filled with fear. And in the midst of their fear, do you remember what Jesus is doing? He's sleeping. He's taking a nap. I love that because it shows us that Jesus is just as human as he is God. But it also seems a little weird that in the midst of this crazy storm, he's sleeping. And check out what it says in Matthew 8:23 through 25. Then he got into the boat and his disciples followed him. And suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. And the disciples went and woke him. They had to wake him. He didn't even awake because of the storm, saying, "Lord, save us. We're going to drown." So if we think about the three different ways in which we can respond, fight, flight, and freeze, the guys were kind of working in the fight, right? They actually took action, tried to take control by asking Jesus to help. And I love what happens here. Not only does Jesus calm the storm and ease his disciples' fear, but I think he proved that there is another way to respond to fear that we can choose. So it says, he replied, meaning Jesus, "O you of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." In the midst of their chaos, in the midst of their fear, they called out to Jesus, and Jesus calmed not only their circumstance, but he also calmed their fear. And look at this particular part. "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" This is where Jesus offers us a different way to respond. And conveniently, it's another F. So we can fight, we can flight, we can freeze, or we can have faith. Have faith in the one that we know is greater than any fear we could ever have in our lives. And I think that's what Jesus wants us to know. He gets that fear is a reality for us as humans, but he doesn't want that to be the only feeling that we experience because he's so much more capable and so much more powerful than the situations that cause us fear. So when we face fear, we have more than just those three options of fight, flight, and freeze. we now have the option of faith. We have the option of not letting fear be the boss of us. And here's how I love to say it. When we're out of control, or I would say when we feel out of control, Jesus is still in control. And I will tell you that in my faith journey, this truth has caused me to fight fear and has caused me to be relieved of fear, to know that God is in control. I mean, when I think about where we've been for the last 10 months of our lives and the craziness and the chaos that COVID has brought, one of the things that I say almost on a daily basis is I'm so glad that God is not taken aback by this, that he's not surprised by this. And actually, he is working in and around and through this COVID season. I want so much for you to not only claim this in your moments of fear, but to believe it. And then take some action with it. Look what Peter tells us to do in 1 Peter 5:7. He says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. So how does that look to choose faith over fight, flight, or freeze? It means that in the moment that you start feeling that fear, that rather than doing those three things, you cast your cares, and it actually in the original term means to heave or to throw your cares onto Jesus. And did you catch who wrote this passage? Peter. Peter, who would have been in the boat on that same day. So he's not just saying this as a nice thing that maybe you could, knit on a pillow or put on your backdrop of your phone. He's writing this out of experience. He's writing this saying, hey, listen, this is the truth because I've experienced this. And he wants us to experience the same thing. So the next time that you are overwhelmed with fear, just stop where you are and either in the quiet of your heart or in a journal or with your mouth or speaking it to someone else, let God know the fear that you're feeling and cast it on him, throw it on him so that it doesn't have to be so heavy on you. God can handle it. His shoulders are so much stronger and so much more prepared than ours are to handle that fear. Invite him into your fear. Tell him, I need you. I want you to come and show me a different way rather than to fight or to flight or to freeze. And I believe that he will. I've seen it in my own life that he will. So the big question is, how do I usually respond to fear? So no matter where you're watching this, if you're watching it with our Zoom experience, you could put something in the chat. If you're watching it with somebody else near you, you could talk with them about it. Or if you're watching it by yourself, you could just journal. Which of those three ways do you typically respond? Do you fight? Do you take flight? Or do you freeze up? It's good to understand how you respond. But then my hope is that you'll claim a new way. And that is your response to fear will be faith in the one who loves you, who created you, who died for you, and who wants so much more for you than a life riddled with fear. So, Lord, I am just so thankful today for the fact that you gave us a new way, that you showed us how we can deal with fear. And so, God, we give our fears to you. From this day forward, I hope I can speak on everyone's behalf. We want to respond in faith rather than in any other way. And I pray, God, that you would give us what we need to do just that. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, as you move into the rest of the week, may you do that fearlessly. Thanks. We'll see you next time.